Hi, Shello.
Hi, Emily.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Where do you live?
So I'm in Toronto. I've lived here my whole life. My family is from the Philippines.
Oh, okay. Is your husband from the Philippines as well?
No, he's Chinese. They're from mainland China.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Do you speak Tagalog?
I don't. My family speaks a different dialect at home. It's called Visayan, and I can understand more than I can say.
Yes, I'm the
Yeah.
same with Thai.
Oh, oh,
Yeah.
cool. I didn't know you were Thai.
Yeah. So you've lived in Toronto your entire life.
Yeah.
Were you born there?
I was born here, and my family had been here since the 70s. Yeah, so second
Oh.
gen.
Oh, is there a big community of Filipino people?
Yeah, it's pretty big. It's pretty
Oh.
big, getting bigger. Toronto's pretty diverse. So I live in a suburb, and it's pretty rare to see a non-Asian driving around.
Where's the suburb? Because I went to Toronto 2 years ago because my husband went to go get adjusted with a physical therapist that we love over there.
Oh,
And I don't know where we stayed. Oh, it was like in where there's like Polish people. Do you
oh, that's
know?
probably downtown.
Okay.
I'm in Markham. Yeah, it's just north.
Okay.
It's like totally the Asian suburb. There's like huge Asian shopping malls and
Oh, okay.
it's
Yeah.
good.
Then
Good food.
we didn't get to go there then because we didn't have a
Oh,
car either. But it seems like, would you say public transportation's pretty good in
yeah, it
Toronto?
is. And I mean, it's not as great in the suburbs, but it's been getting better. They've been developing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. So you have two children.
I do.
And how old is your first? You have a son, right?
Yeah, he just turned 3 last Saturday. And then my little one is almost 3 months. She'll be 3 months on the 26th.
Oh my God. So your fourth trimester is almost past.
Yeah, almost done.
And how have you been feeling? How's postpartum been?
It's been really good. I mean, just everything, everything like pregnancy, preconception, the pregnancy, labor, delivery, postpartum, everything has been totally different with my son versus now. And it's been really good. I mean, the second time around, you also know what to expect. So I think I had a better idea of what I wanted, better boundaries, was more prepared. So yeah, it's been a breeze. It's been really nice.
Wow. Well, I can't wait to hear more about it. So take me to the beginning. Let's start with your first pregnancy.
Okay, so this is 2019, and I had been living with my now husband. We weren't married yet, but we happened to be like talking about it around the same time that I got pregnant.
Did you guys meet in Toronto?
We did. We met at a at an EDM festival. Yeah. So we lived a very different lifestyle prior to having kids, and it was like a really quick 180 for us. Um, we weren't like trying, but we also weren't preventing, like we weren't doing any kind of birth control. I was loosely tracking my cycle, not fertility awareness, but like, I had some knowledge of, when you're fertile. And so it came as a surprise. This is March 2019 when I found out I was pregnant. Um, I was late, and I'm like never late on my period, and so it was like big surprise, and but we were really happy about it. But from the get-go I was pretty anxious. Like it was just my personality type. I grew up in an immigrant Asian family, and there's not really a lot of space to explore your own intuition. Um, so I was used to looking for instruction and following the rules and all of that. So with the pregnancy, I like didn't want to do anything wrong, so to speak. So I went in to see my family doctor, and I ended up finding a midwifery clinic. Um, Not many of my friends had kids yet, so from their experiences, it sounded like midwifery was more of like a personalized approach, like they don't rush you in and out sort of thing. So I did that, and I also opted in for the first trimester genetic screening. And this was, looking back, this was like the first hook into like sort of the hyper monitoring that can happen in the allopathic system. And I had no idea what I was getting into. So I thought, you know, this testing would be like, you take a blood test and they tell you if there is, you know, Down syndrome or one of the other trisomies, but it's not like that. So it's not diagnostic, and it also can give them other information regarding the pregnancy. And I had no idea that this was part of it. So I get my results back, and
Wait, so it's a blood test?
It's a blood test, and they check four different protein markers, to tell you if there's a higher risk of the presence of a genetic abnormality. It's not diagnostic. So if you do come back high risk, you go on to do more testing. So my midwife calls me. It's the end of the week, and she calls me on my lunch break to deliver these results. I also didn't realize that I would be getting them over the phone. So she tells me, I'm so sorry. Your results came back high risk, and you need to start baby aspirin, and we're going to set you up with a geneticist, like an appointment at a hospital with a specialist to talk about further testing. And I was like, I had so many questions, and her method of delivery was really awkward and like quick. And I don't know if it was because it was like 6 p.m. at the end of the week and she wanted to get to her weekend, or she had something else to do. But I was just like, what does high risk mean? Like, is there a number that you can give me? And she says, you're a 1 in 15 chance based on, I had something called low PAP-A. My level of PAP-A was not normal, I guess, and it was associated with a 1 in 15 chance of Down syndrome. And apparently it was also associated with higher risk of placental like dysfunction in late term pregnancy. And so that was why they wanted me to take low dose aspirin to increase the blood flow to the placenta. And I was like, okay, like what causes this? And she didn't have any answers for me. She was just kind of like, we'll talk about it at your next appointment, and we'll send you into the geneticist. So I'm left there for the weekend to like stress out about this. And I actually have a friend in high school whose dad is an obstetrician. So I call my friend, and she passes the phone to her dad, and I'm like in tears, and he's confused because he's like, this test doesn't actually tell you anything. Like, you can do the NIPT, which is the next step if you want to get a diagnosis for any of the trisomies. So he's able to expedite the testing for me. And it still takes like a week to come in, and I'm like stressed to the max. And it comes back and it's negative. So that's great. But then because of that experience with the midwife over the phone, I was really upset, and I was like, I think I'm probably going to switch to an OB because I didn't like the way that felt. I'm just going to pick her up. Sorry.
Go for it.
Nice, yeah, you did. She doesn't want to miss out. She's really social.
Oh, hi, baby.
So I end up transferring to an obstetrician. I just get referred through the local hospital. And at the beginning, it was, I felt better about it. I didn't feel rushed. It was a guy, and he was pretty young. I think he had only been in practice for a couple of years. But I never felt like, you know, like he answered all of my questions. I had no complaints. But at the 20-week ultrasound, because, you know, at this time, I don't opt out of anything because I kind of just go along with what everyone does. So at the 20-week ultrasound, it comes back saying that I have a marginal cord insertion in my placenta, which means that instead of the cord being in the center, it is at the edge. And because of this, and because of the low PAP-A, they're concerned about my placenta. So my doctor tells me that I'm going to have serial ultrasounds starting at 32 or 34 weeks. So every 2 weeks, I'm going to have another ultrasound to monitor the placenta, and to monitor the growth of the baby, because I think the percentile had dropped. And by the way, like, I'm 5 feet tall. It's probably like 100 pounds at the time. I wasn't going to have an 8-pound baby. But this IUGR thing, like this concern about the baby not being big enough, would follow me like throughout all those extra ultrasounds. So 32 weeks comes, and the next ultrasound says that the marginal cord isn't there anymore, so that's good. It's like it's because the placenta grows as the pregnancy goes on, right? So it had grown in such a way, yeah, that wasn't concerning. But now the weight percentile of the baby was dropping. So again, they bring up IUGR. And then at 34 or 36 weeks, my doctor starts talking about induction. Catches me off guard because he never mentioned anything at the beginning of the pregnancy, and I didn't like the idea of it, because to me, if the baby isn't ready to come out, why are we going to make it come out? And his answer to that was, at past 38 weeks, apparently the fetus or the baby is able to survive outside of the womb. And I was like, that, I don't care. Like, I would rather, if we can wait, why wouldn't we wait? And then he goes on to say, the placenta is an organ that has a certain lifespan. So the later you go, the more likely it is for your placenta to crap out. And you already have this result from the beginning of your pregnancy that says that there could be an issue with the function. So we just want to like circumvent that. And at the end of that appointment, I was just like, is it safe to wait? And he couldn't say no. So we waited. I go to do the stress test at 38 weeks. So all of this is a lot of like ultrasound exposure, right? Every 2 weeks, stress test. And then after the stress test, he was like, let's revisit talking about induction at your next appointment. And I was so anxious because of this, because I didn't want to do it. I end up like looking up natural ways of induction, and we didn't really try much, but we did have sex the night before my water broke. And so in the morning, I like feel a trickle, and it's not like gushing out. It's just like very little. But I don't really know what to make of that. And I did have a doula, so I called her, and her suggestion was to try to stay home as long as possible. Like, you don't have to go in. You can try to wait for the sensations to get stronger. And then I asked her, but do I have to be concerned about infection? And she said, as long as you're not like presenting anything, like you don't feel sick or have a fever, it should be fine. But like I said, like, I'm super anxious about doing the wrong thing. So I called a doctor friend. She's like a family doctor, and like her advice obviously was, oh, definitely go in, like, just to be sure. You don't want to miss anything. So that scared me, and I went in, and I didn't realize that you don't get to go home in this situation. Like, if you go in with your waters broken, they're going to keep you there, or they're going to tell you that they don't suggest that you go home, which is what they said to me. I didn't realize that I could be like, okay, I'm going to leave anyways.
Yeah. How many weeks were you at this point?
I was 39 weeks when my water broke. So we go to the hospital. I don't even take my bag with me, because I'm thinking like they're just going to tell me that it's broken and I'm going to wait at home. But we go in, and the nurse there confirms that my water is broken. And she says she's going to give me a cervix check. And at this point, I hadn't had a single one. And I was nervous about it because, everyone has a different experience, and I wasn't sure if it was going to hurt. So I asked her, is it going to hurt? And she says, there will be a lot of pressure. And this nurse was like similar build to me. She was petite. And I remember, like, as she was doing it, she had to like put more force. Like it was like my body was bearing down on her doing the check, and she had to push back against me to get it done. I know it's terrible. And it hurt. And so she says, I'm barely like half a centimeter dilated. So labor wasn't starting. And I speak to my doctor. He happens to be on duty that day. And he says, you know, he wants to induce. And I'm like, can I just like try to wait for labor to start for like as long as possible? And he agrees to let me. The nurse had said something like kind of offhand. Like she was telling me that she didn't think my doctor would let me wait to be induced. And the way that she said it was like she trailed off. She said something like, "Oh, he can be so like dot dot dot." And when I tried to ask her to elaborate on this, she wouldn't say anything, obviously, because she didn't want to be unprofessional. But just that was like, I was like, this is weird. Like, why would you say this about your coworker? My anxiety was just like building throughout this experience. So I managed to get him to let me wait, and I walk around the hospital basically for 7 hours. And it doesn't do much. I don't really start to feel, I think I felt a little bit like maybe like really light sensations, but nothing was really going. And it wasn't going to, because I didn't feel safe. Right now I know that that's how it works. So we go back to the maternity ward, and my doctor comes in and he's like, okay, so let's think high numbers, because you know you want to be like more dilated so that we don't have to induce. And so I'm like bracing myself for the cervix check, and it feels the same at first. It hurts, and then it hurts more. And I remember like digging my heels into the bed and trying to push my body in the opposite direction. And I like scream. I'm like, are you just checking, or are you doing something else? And he like takes his hand out quickly and looks really flustered. And he's like, I just did a mini stretch. You're barely 1 centimeter dilated. And I'm like in shock. It's obviously traumatic, and I don't address it, because I like when these things happen like in the moment and you don't really know what to expect. Like he didn't tell me that he was going to do a stretch, so there was no consent or like any kind of forewarning that was going to happen. And I was just stunned, and I hated the cervix checks, and I just wanted the quickest way out of this experience. So I agreed to be induced, and I decided to go with Pitocin because I don't want to give any of the staff any more reason to be putting their hands up my vagina. So I agreed to Pitocin, and I don't really.
Is your doula there with you yet?
Not yet, because I didn't know when to have her come in, because labor hadn't really started. Looking back, it would have been good, but I really didn't know. Like, I didn't know what to expect. So she comes in. It was like 4 p.m. when I had the cervix check. She comes in around 7. And as soon as I see her, I burst into tears, and I'm like, he gave me a stretch without telling me. And she also bursts into tears and like falls to her knees in front of me, and she's like, I'm so sorry, like that shouldn't have happened, are you okay? And it was the first time anyone had given me like, I guess, confirmation that what had happened was fucked up. And I'm just like, I'm fine, like I just want to get out of here, like I just want this to be over. And so we're waiting for the Pitocin to kick in. It takes a while. And I did write about this experience on my Instagram, but I didn't include everything, and this is part of what I didn't include. So I'm laboring on Pitocin, and it's getting more intense, and all of a sudden I feel like I need to poop, and it's a really like constipated feeling. So I'm hooked up to the fetal monitor and the IV drip, and I have to wheel everything into the washroom. And I've got my husband with me just to like help me move everything. And I'm sitting there, trying to go, and this nurse comes in, not my nurse, someone's covering for her, and she says, we can't see the heartbeat, you have to get back in bed. And I'm like, I will, I'm just in the middle of pooping, don't worry, like I'll go. And she's like, no, you have to go now. We were not sure if the baby's okay. And I'm like, if he was fine before I got up, he's probably fine, and I'm gonna finish pooping.
Yeah.
So she leaves. She leaves, and she comes back with reinforcement. She's got another nurse with her, and so now I have two nurses yelling at me on the toilet to get back into bed. And I'm like, no, like I'm yelling back. I need to go. I'm like in the middle of going while they're doing this. And finally, that first nurse says, if there's a problem with your baby, you're going to need an emergency C-section if you don't listen to us. So she pulls the, like, your baby's going to die card. And it scares me, obviously. So I get up and I go back to bed. They readjust the monitor, and the monitor sucks, by the way. Like, it's like a disc attached to a strip that has no adhesive. So if you get up, if you take 3 steps, it's gonna move, and whatever signal they're getting isn't gonna be consistent.
Yeah, it's totally inaccurate.
Yeah. And they hook it up again, and they see that the baby is fine. And I ask that first nurse, so can I go now? And she, like, is annoyed, rolls her eyes at me, and she says, we don't know if things are going to be okay if you do that. And I'm like, well, you got what you asked for, so I'm going to go finish taking a poop. So I go, and it's really difficult because, like, I'm trying to do this through the Pitocin contractions, which are really strong, and they're like, the contractions are probably affecting, like, my bowel movement as well. I go, but it doesn't feel like I was able to finish through, like, the contractions. And I go back to bed, and up until this point I had been, like, breathing through them with my doula, and it felt manageable. But after all of that yelling with the nurses, it completely broke my focus, and I wasn't able to sort of get back to where I was, and I end up asking for the epidural. So they hook up the epidural, and I think at one point they turn off the Pitocin because my body was just not going along with it. And I think I get another cervix check, and they tell me that I'm maybe 2 centimeters. And after this, my doula suggests sifting with the reposo, like sifting my hips. So I have the epidural in, but I, like, hoist myself into a hands and knees position, like supporting myself on the back of the hospital bed. Mm-hmm. And she's sifting. This is to, like, get the baby to move down, hopefully. And I do feel him descend, but it's, like, really hard work. So she was doing that for like 20 minutes, and she's, like, breathing really hard, and it's, like, really hot in the room, and we take a break, like, we're intending to get back to it. But while we're resting, another nurse comes in. Again, someone that was covering for my regular nurse, and she doesn't introduce herself, doesn't tell me what she's doing there. She just starts bossing me around, like getting me to change positions, like shoving a peanut ball in between my legs. And I'm like, is this another issue with the monitor? Because she's, like, concerned about the heartbeat. And she says, no, I have to check inside. And I'm like, okay, like, can we wait until the doctor gets here? Because I don't even know this woman's name. I don't know what's going on. She doesn't take any time to explain to me. And she says, no, we can't wait. I have to do it now. So she, like, denies my, like, not wanting to do it. And she puts her hand in, like, she gloves up and puts her hand in. And she's very, like, rough. Like, so I have the epidural in at this point, but I can still see what's happening. Like, I can see her, like, having to adjust and, like, reshove her arm in there. And I find out later, like, what she wanted to do was called a scalp stim. So they scratch the baby's head to try to get the heartbeat to get going again. And it seems to work, because I guess the signal pops up again on the monitor. And so she goes, oh, see, everything's okay. And then before she takes her hand out, like I have no idea, like I can't explain what this was. Before she takes her hand out, she looks at me and she goes, "See, it's okay." Like with her hand in my vagina. Yeah. It was, I had no words. I look at my doula who's like standing by the bed, and she has the same, like she feels how I feel. And I don't understand what happened. And it's disgusting to like watch that happen to yourself when you can't feel what's going on. Like thankfully there was no pain because of the epidural, but it was disturbing. And then the doctor comes in, and by this point it's like been more than 12 hours at the hospital, so it's not my doctor anymore. The shift has changed. And the first thing the doctor says is, "How dilated is she?" And this nurse goes, "I don't know, I didn't check. I'll check now." So she goes to get another pair of
Oh
gloves.
my, the
Yeah,
same
and
nurse?
that same nurse doesn't ask me, doesn't, I still don't know her name. And she goes to get another pair of gloves, and I just like put my arm out and I'm like, "You're not coming anywhere near me." And I start shouting the name of like two other nurses. And I get one of them to do it. And the one that does it, like, she's at least respectful. Like she narrated each step of what she was doing. So she'd be like, I'm putting on gloves, I'm putting on lube, touch, and I'm going in. Like, at least, I'm not like a body bag. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
And while this is happening, apparently, like I didn't know this because I wasn't paying attention. My doula and that nurse got into a shouting match. And I think this prompted the nurse to try to come back and explain herself, because after they checked my cervix, she came by and she's like, "My name is so and so. I've been with the labor and delivery ward for however many years," and blah blah blah. And I just couldn't even make eye contact with her. I was like done interacting with her. And so I'm not progressing. They're telling me that the baby isn't doing well with the pitocin, and they're seeing like heart decelerations, and they're concerned. And it's been 36 hours and I'm exhausted. I haven't slept through any of that because they're checking my temperature every hour. So I don't even get like an opportunity to rest. So I agreed to the C-section because I was just out of gas. My doula isn't allowed in with us, but my husband's there. And so we go, and the I remember being extremely tired, and sort of fighting the urge to fall asleep because I don't want to miss the birth of my son. And the conversation in the operating room was, I don't think it was appropriate. Like one of the nurses was complaining about the fact that my doula had essential oils and coconut oil. Like it's supposed to be a scent free environment or whatever, but like, and I understand if you have a sensitivity, but that is not the place to be talking about your issues. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Or
Like,
about anyone.
yeah. So, um, there's no issues with the C-section. They pull him out, and I burst into tears the second I see him. And for a long time I couldn't really, um I didn't have words for that moment. But looking back, it was it was all trauma because we were separated. Like the first time I'm meeting my son, I'm like immobile. I'm cut open, and he's crying, and I don't have him in my arms. And it's like, I think it's something that you don't know how to process right away, and it takes a lot of time and like language. There was an episode of the Freebirth Society podcast actually that once I listened to it, I was like, that's what happened. It's the second part in the 3-part surrogacy series where the surrogate mother talks about her C-section experience. And she's like, even though that's not my baby, that's my son, and like I need him and he needs me, and we're not able to be there for each other. And that was exactly it. Like, and I think probably my husband felt it too, because he burst into tears at the same time, and I'm really grateful that he was able to hold him in those first moments. But it felt like a robbery for me. And so I have to wait an hour before I get to hold him in the recovery room. And before I get to hold him, I have to go through that awful like fundal massage. But I'm so high still at this point that I think it kind of takes the edge off of it for me, because it really hurt, but I like barely said anything. Meanwhile, there's another mother in the recovery room, like behind the curtain, and she's like screaming her head off, like shouting, like, no, don't touch me, like it hurts. And I'm sitting there like holding my son, and I'm like, holy shit, like what is this? This does not feel right at all. But I'm able to breastfeed him for a little bit while we're in that room, but he ends up needing to go to the NICU for low blood sugar. And I would learn afterward that low blood sugar is a side effect of having been on Pitocin for so long. Like the hyperstimulation of the uterus can cut off oxygen to the baby, and this affects their blood sugar. And nobody told me that when I agreed to do the Pitocin. But so he needs to go to the NICU, and they tell me when we first go there, they tell me that I can breastfeed him if I want to, but they're gonna put him on a feeding schedule. And it was like I could top him up with breast milk if I wanted to, but it was really important for him to get the formula because of the low blood sugar. They wanted to keep track of his intake and all of that. And he has to keep getting like the heel pricks to test the blood sugar. It was really awful. I wanted to breastfeed from the get-go. I didn't want to have to do formula at all, but I don't have any fight in me at this point to argue with them or question them. So we go along with it, and it really affects the breastfeeding relationship, obviously, because we don't get any of that, that bonding time together in the beginning. And it ends up being really hard later on. I combo fed for 8 months until he wouldn't latch anymore, and I was really devastated by it. And like the information that they give you at the hospital on breastfeeding is so bullshit. There was one time I was sitting in the NICU feeding him after a bottle feed, breastfeeding him, and I sat there for an hour because he was just in and out of sleep and eating, and this is just our bonding time. And the nurse comes in and she's like, you've been here for an hour? That's way too long. Like apparently they wanted him to be able to sleep in between feeds so that he would have energy for the next feed. And that, like, these things stay with me. Like the idea that an hour could be too long to breastfeed is bullshit. But they said it to me, and so it was really confusing when I went home trying to figure out how to breastfeed, because now I have this like expectation that there should be like a time limit.
Yeah.
Which,
I totally feel you, because my son actually got infant botulism, which is like toxins like from the dirt. And he was hospitalized, and he didn't latch for a bit, and so it's like his nervous system shut down on him.
Oh no.
Yeah, he's all better now because he got treatment. But when he wanted to suck on me so bad, but he was on a feeding tube, and they're like, oh, they can't, like, you can't do that with him because he might aspirate or something, and so he needs to keep getting milk through the feeding tube, and you have to wait for a what is it, like a specialist to come in to see if he's clear to swallow. And so like the day that we went to get him checked, he latched on, and like I cried because like, yeah, you lose that feeling, and like you want to connect, you want to be able to feed your baby. And she was like, but just make sure it's only 15 minutes at a time, because you don't want to tire him out. And I was like, I'm not gonna listen to you. Like, he's fine at 15 minutes. If he wants to still be on me, I'm going to let him.
Good for you.
Yeah, it's just bullshit. Like, why they put every human being in a box.
Yeah.
And that's not the case. Yeah.
And it's really hard to shake it if you don't like, if no one else explains to you that that is bullshit, then for me, I just didn't know how to shake the dependency on formula. Because when we got him out of the NICU, we were at the hospital for 5 days, so we were like in the hospital room for a day and a half with him. And I was just breastfeeding because I had no interest in giving him formula. One of the nurses came in and asked us, "Are you giving him formula?" And we said, "We don't even have any." And she's like, "Oh, the doctor said that you have to because of like the low blood sugar and all that." And so they gave us formula, and that started the habit of breastfeeding and topping him up, breastfeeding and topping him up. And I tried really hard to, pump and keep my supply up, but I just could not shake the insecurity afterward. Yeah, that was the experience at the hospital, and postpartum was just full of stress. I really did not feel like myself. And this is December 2019. Those first few weeks I was just so sleep deprived, and I didn't really have an idea of what I wanted support to look like. I did have my mother-in-law and my mom close by, but it wasn't like, and I mean no offense to them, but like it wasn't the type of help that I think I needed. Like I don't want to have to delegate tasks. Like if there's a bunch of laundry lying around or takeout or dishes, like good help should just do it without like
Totally.
asking. And
Absolutely.
I had a few postpartum hours with my doula, and whenever she came over, it was like that. Like she wouldn't, like she would just fold laundry. She made food. She put things away without me having to ask. But with with family, everyone's really excited about the baby and just wants to hold the baby while you like try to put your life together, and that's not helpful. That's like additional stress on the mom. And I don't really process anything in those first few weeks, obviously, because you're a new mom, you're trying to figure things out. But I definitely have PTSD. And my husband, like, I think had a bout of depression because there was a period of time when he was sleeping for like 15 hours a day, because he just didn't know how to deal with like me being stressed and learning how to be a parent. And we just did not have support. But I did end up going into therapy, I want to say like in the spring, and I did EMDR. I don't know if you're familiar. So it's kind of adjunct to cognitive behavioral therapy. It stands for eye movement reprocessing and desensitization, and it's kind of like a brain hack. It allows you to look at past trauma, like look at it from a different lens. There's a stimulus while you're doing the therapy. There's something, it'll be like, it could be a moving object or alternating tones or alternating pulses in your hand. And the point is to get your eyes to move back and forth. And somehow this like allows you to like bypass the trauma that you feel that prevents you from processing the trauma. And it was really effective. It did take maybe a year, but I was able to get through like retelling most of the story without like completely melting. It was a lot of work and a lot of like having to look at my own childhood trauma and my own triggers and seeing the connection between why this experience was so difficult for me and how that was connected to things in my childhood. So it was really good, and I definitely like recommend that to anyone that's looking for something to help get through birth trauma. And somewhere along the way during this time, I find the Freebirth Society podcast and I start listening, and I'm like binging the episodes. I don't want to stop having kids, but I definitely don't want to go through the same thing again. And all these episodes started making it feel like that was possible. I just didn't know how, because I wasn't quite ready to jump into like a free birth. Like I still needed, I still felt like I needed someone to like tell me what the right thing to do was. It's now December 2020, and I end up enrolling into the Radical Birth Keeper School, not necessarily to get into birth work, more to kind of like see how everything works, like how do people attend births outside of the system and all that. And
So is this
I
1 year
also,
later since your son was
yeah,
born? Okay.
yeah, he was one. The pandemic, like the lockdowns started in March of 2020, and in a way this, it was kind of good for me because it prevented me from interacting with people who would have normalized what I went through, right? Like I did have my mom and my mother-in-law say things like, you know, it's the stress you're feeling is normal, the fights you're having with your husband is normal, but I like did not accept that at all in my bones. I'm like, this cannot be normal. Like how would we be able to thrive as a society if for so long if mothers are going through this? And then when lockdowns happened and you know no one was visiting, there was no one to kind of keep telling me that, and I had the space to sort of figure out what the truth was for myself. So yeah, so yeah, I roll in and enroll into the school. I connect with a few people who had taken the school in my area, which was really nice. It was really nice to have community because, again, like I only had two friends at that point who had had kids, and I don't think their births were, I don't think they, if they were traumatic, I don't think they went after the processing of it in the same way as I did. So I really had no one to talk to about it in my like day-to-day life. So that was an outlet for me to be able to talk about what happened and to learn like that I'm not a one-off case, that this happens so often and that women do go on to have different experiences. So that was really important for me. So in after the school, this is June of 2021, my husband and I decided to start trying again. I'm very desperate doing it. Like I'm very anxious about it because I don't want that first experience to be the only experience that I have. But I'm, because of that, I'm like, you know, I guess there's like additional pressure I'm putting on myself. I was doing fertility awareness and, you know, tracking all the things, the temperature and all of that. And in September, I end up getting pregnant and I hire a traditional birth attendant. I don't know if you've heard of her. She's Billy Harrigan.
No, but I
She's in
looked her
the,
up.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah. So she's really great. She's kind of like an elder midwife, and she's been doing this for a really long time. I had done a trauma debrief with her, and I really liked her, so I signed up with her. And in that in that second pregnancy, I had the initial blood test. It was like she suggested it, and but she was like, you don't have to do it if you don't want to. It's just information. Like it'll tell us about your diet and if you maybe want to adjust anything. And it came back saying I was like slightly deficient in vitamin D, and so that's all I did. I took a supplement, but that pregnancy ended at 10 weeks because I ended up miscarrying. And it was so sad because, you know, I had my hopes up to do a home birth and do things differently. And it felt like at the time it felt like, oh, now I have to start all over again. And what if it doesn't happen and all that? While it was like, I was really sad, it's definitely something that you mourn. It did something for me that I wasn't expecting because it wasn't a medicalized experience. I didn't go in for a D&C. It just, I had the miscarriage and it was like a heavy period. And it was scary at times because it was something that I hadn't felt before. My body did what it was supposed to do. And there was something healing about that because that's not what happened the first time. And it was like hormonally like a loop closed or something, like subconsciously, like I was able to trust that my body was doing what it needed to do, even though it was a really sad event. So after the miscarriage, like, and after maybe like a month of like feeling really down about it, we continued to try, but it didn't feel, I didn't feel as desperate. So I felt, I don't know, I think it gave me confidence in some way. And it's really hard to talk about because, to begin with, people don't talk about miscarriage, like, and even less in like a positive light. But I really appreciate that I went through that before this pregnancy, because it allowed me to trust that my body was doing what it needed to do. And I don't think I had that after the first birth, the C-section. So we keep trying, and then I end up getting pregnant again in 3 months. And I, rehire Billy, and I don't end up doing anything. It ends up being a wild pregnancy. I didn't really like intend, I didn't have like any desire for that. It's just what ended up happening because there was no need to see anyone. And it was really great. Like, it was so stress-free. I just didn't worry about anything. And I also, I think I ate better for this last pregnancy. I kind of followed Brewer's diet. The symptoms were manageable, and yeah, I just had no complaints. At 14 weeks, Billy ended up pulling out of my birth because her husband passed away. And I was really sad for her, but for my situation, I was like, this is okay. Like, I think I was already toying with the idea that I wasn't gonna call her until the baby was out. Like, I would just want her to be there to, like, I don't know, assess the baby, tell us everything looks good. But I was kind of feeling like I didn't need her to be in the room at the time, like during labor. So when she pulled out, I was like, I told her this, and I'm like, I really appreciate you being honest with what you're able to do, and I just want to tell you that I think I'm going to be okay. And I hadn't even really reached out to her much in that pregnancy anyways, up until that point, because there was no need. But yeah, it was just like a lot more simple. I had my doula again, the same doula, who has now, like, she's like leaving the system. She doesn't attend hospital births anymore. She couldn't take it, especially after all the like ridiculous policies with COVID and limitations and all that.
Nice.
Yeah, so I had her, and I had another RBK graduate come.
And so how many weeks are you at this point? I mean, when you decided that you would have your an RBK attend?
It was probably a few weeks after Billy pulled out. I want to say maybe like 20 weeks that I called her up. And yeah, it was just easy. And in terms of like my family and, my husband's family, I did different things to when I was talking about it, because it's really obvious when someone resonates with what you say, or has like a lot of their own fear around it. So with our families, I just said that we had a midwife. And I mean, technically, she's an unlicensed midwife, so I wasn't really lying. And then when she pulled out, like, I just didn't mention that she wasn't coming. I was just like, yeah, I have a midwife, but she's not coming. With friends, there were only like a couple of friends that I ended up being really honest about. And it was nice when I would share with someone and they would kind of like reflect back the confidence that I had about what I was talking about. And then there were also times when I would share, and then people would like the air would get sucked out of the room and they had nothing to say, type of thing. And then I'd just be like, oh, okay, I see that this is not for you.
Totally. Wait, so what were your reactions? What were both your in-laws and your parents' reactions when you said, I mean, you were gonna have a home birth?
Well, my mom is one of 8 kids, and my grandma had all of her kids at home with a midwife.
In Toronto?
So, no, in the Philippines.
Okay.
Yeah. And I found out later that I had actually met the midwife who delivered my mom, because she's a family friend. And unfortunately, she's passed away, but that would have been so great to like pick her brain about how things were done at the time in the Philippines. My mom was like, oh, I was born at home. So she wasn't really against it. I think she had curiosity about it. And she also knew like I was going to do what whatever I decided to do. She just, she was just like, if anything comes up, you let me know. She did have concerns. And then with my in-laws, we kind of didn't go into as much detail. We just said we have a midwife. But my husband did end up telling them when the midwife pulled out, when Billy pulled out, and they were like, oh, like maybe you guys should just go to a doctor. And I wasn't there for this conversation, but when he came back to tell me this, he was like, oh, maybe I'll just not bring it up with them. And I'm like, yeah, that's probably the best idea. So they were really respectful, I felt, of our decision.
Are you the oldest, or do you have siblings?
I'm an only child.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So who's the RPK? Is it how do you pronounce her name?
Ninaru.
Mm-hmm. So does she come to do some just, prenatal appointments, or just come to say hi? And
I did have prenatals with her. We went out, like we got ice cream freeze, and we would talk for like 4 hours and just talk about like my state of mind and whatever was going on in life, and if I had any fears come up. And so on that note, like if I was afraid of anything, there was nothing really about the birth that I was concerned about. In those weeks, I was more concerned about my husband and my son and the logistics of the day and like how is that going to work, because I was stressed out about if we were going to be like arguing about something. I don't know, this is all like arbitrary, but for some reason that's what came up for me. And it's funny because none of that panned out at all. It was like totally fine on that front when the birth actually happened. Around 38 weeks, I started having stronger practice contractions. I also ate like a really spicy bowl of noodles that I wasn't expecting to be spicy, and that really gave me some strong contractions. I was really concerned.
Wait, did you buy the complete guide to Freebirth?
I got it through the school.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's right. That's right.
So I did have access to it. Yeah.
Did
and
you,
I had gone.
Did you watch
I
a lot of it?
Like way before the pregnancy. Yeah. And I also did a workshop with Billy. She holds a workshop called Birthing in a Technocratic System. And it's not completely like outside of the system, it's like system adjacent. So if you're considering going to the hospital, she'll go over what might happen and what strategies to have if you don't want to agree to everything. And that workshop was really good for my husband because his fears were that I was going to die or the baby was going to die. He was just concerned about the baby breathing. And in this workshop, he learned that if the cord is still connected, the baby is oxygenated. And that had never, like, that information had never been presented to him before. So he felt really good after learning just that. So it was really nice.
Totally. That's a common thing too with
yeah
everyone. Yeah. Thinking that. Totally.
So we went into it feeling really good. When it actually started, it started at midnight, or probably just before, because I think I did bedtime with my son and I was in such a cranky mood. I was like telling my husband, like, you're gonna have to do daycare drop off tomorrow and breakfast because I gotta do this thing because I think it's really starting. And then midnight it started getting more consistent, and in early labor I was able to like get in and out of the tub a couple times and bounced on the exercise ball. I listened to Yolanda's birth affirmations, but it was also surprising because I had this story in my head because of my first experience. Like, I knew what Pitocin contractions felt like, but I didn't have any idea what my own would feel like. But I had heard that Pitocin is like more intense, can kind of be like on top of each other. So I was thinking, okay, if I could manage to get through that with my doula and there are no nurses yelling at me about going to the bathroom, then I can probably handle my own contractions. So, but when mine started happening, I had back labor with this one. And I was not expecting that. And that was intense. Wow. That was pretty intense from the get-go. I was able to sleep early on. I want to say from like midnight to 5. I was like able to get some sleep. And then after that, it just kind of picked up and was picked up consistently. And then around 9, I called my doula because I was like, I want pain management. Up until this point, I had told them, both of them, Minoru and my doula, that I wasn't sure if I was going to call them right away or if I wanted them like right after. And I ended up wanting them to come right away because I was like, I was not expecting this at all. So they came and they like took their time coming because they knew like, they weren't really going to be able to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
So they showed up around 12, 1-ish, and my doula did give me a sacral massage. She suggested peppermint oil. I had really bad nausea as well. And we did hip compressions, which were really good. It's all just like you still had to go through it, right?
Yeah.
So it's funny because I didn't really have a mantra going into it. I think if I were to have another kid, I would probably want to practice, like have a more consistent meditation practice. Because the only thing that I was repeating throughout this labor was "God damn it," like because it was so intense, and I was like locked in hands and knees. Like I could not handle any of the contractions in any other position. I tried to force myself to lie down because I was so tired, and I was like, I just want a quick nap. But when the contraction hit, like my whole body was shaking because it was like, this is not. You need to be on your hands and knees.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of that might have had to do with the fact that she was head up. My son was like in the proper position, like head down facing me the entire time. And this one she was head up the whole time up until probably a couple hours, if not just before she came out.
Okay.
Because I palpated myself. I bought a fetoscope. I figured out how to find her heartbeat on my own.
Wow, that's impressive. And you could
Yeah.
feel where her head was?
Yes. Yeah. And I have stretch marks like only where her head was. And when I see them, I'm just like, oh, that was you.
Oh, wait,
Pushing
where are
my
the stretch
belly.
marks?
They're like around my belly button.
Oh,
Yeah. So
oh,
she was
okay.
like on her side, head up. It was really intense, kept throwing up. I sniffed peppermint oil, which helped with the nausea.
Wait, so when you felt that her head was up, there was no concern.
Um not not a huge concern, no, because I figured like if she was breech, she was just gonna come out anyway. And I did look up breech birth and what to do. And apparently, while I was upstairs laboring, my husband and my doula, well, my husband was on YouTube, like looking up breech birth, and my doula was like talking to one of her doula friends, like asking for advice if it was breech. So I had put the idea in everyone else's head that she was going to be breech. um, and then around 4, I was getting really frustrated, and I told my doula like, it feels like nothing is changing. It's just the same thing over and over again. I have to stay in this hands and knees position, and I feel like throwing up. And she was like, well, you can do a couple things. You can try changing positions, or I can run the bath for you and you can get in and see if that helps. And I was like, okay, let's try the bath. So I get into the bath, and it's like, it's so soothing. It put a pause to the contractions. And I just sat in there for I have no idea how long anything was, and I just zoned out for a little bit, and it was really nice. And when the contractions picked up again, I have a feeling that was transition, because when it started again, it was like a whole new level of intense.
And you were in the tub still?
I was in the
Okay.
tub. I didn't mean to be, but that's what ended up happening. The heat felt really good. It wasn't necessarily the water, it was just being like enclosed in heat. Oh, I also want to mention, so my doula, she was great throughout all of it, like not pushy at all,
Mm-hmm.
like totally letting me lead the entire time. But it's funny because even though I wanted her there for like pain management, I was still orienting my body away from her whenever she was in the room. I don't think I even made eye contact with her once. I was just like in my own zone.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was in the tub, she was like sitting at the end of it, and I was at the other end, and I was like perpendicular to the tub. So I wasn't like sitting in it the long way. And it's like it's just funny to think about because I had like crammed myself into the opposite corner of the tub, but I still wanted her there. And so the contractions are strong, and I'm like, I have to brace my shoulder against the side of the tub because that's how strong they are. It felt like it was taking a really long time, but I think by the end of it, the pushing stage was only 20 minutes.
Is Ninaru there yet?
She is in the house, but
Okay.
she didn't end up coming upstairs. I think she only came up to give me a seltzer water for the nausea. And when I saw her, I was in between contractions and I'm like standing there with my hands on my hips and I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna make it without having to go to the hospital. And she gives me this look. She's just like she can't tell if I'm being serious because like I'm totally fine. I'm just really in my head about the contractions. And she's like, no, you're fine. Like, and then she leaves. Yeah. So yeah, I feel her coming down eventually, and it's really intense. I have it in my head that it's gonna be breech, right? So I'm waiting for my doula to tell me if she sees anything, and I keep asking what's happening, and my doula's like, "Oh, nothing yet," and then I can feel her crowning, and my water broke. Like my water broke, and it was loud, like it was like a gun, like
In
it
the
was.
tub?
Yeah, and Ninaru was downstairs, and later she was like, "Oh, I could hear it from the kitchen."
Whoa.
Yeah, and it's like far away to our bathroom. After the water broke, like she started moving, and the crowning was like pretty excruciating, and it took a long time. I felt, but in reality, it was like probably 15 minutes. But every contraction was like come down a little bit, and then go back up and then come down. When she started crowning, I was like, what is it? Like, is because I'm asking my doula, is it a head or I swear it because I thought it was gonna be a butt.
Wait, cause so
And
what position are you in right now?
hands and knees
In the tub?
in the tub, like over the
Okay.
side of the tub.
Okay.
Yeah. And my
Wait, so your
doula,
doula had to like peer.
yeah, she
Yeah.
had to
Yeah.
she had to like look around the side because I didn't want to face
Yeah.
her, right? So eventually she tells me, "Oh, I see hair. Like it's a head." And I'm just like, "Are you sure?" Like I was just like, "Wow." I was totally expecting her to come out butt first. And my doula's like, "Well, I'm pretty sure it's a head unless unless your baby has a hairy butt." And so she crowns, and it was like it definitely burned. As soon as her head was out, the time in between her head coming out and the next contraction felt like forever. Like I tried really hard not to push because I didn't really know what to do. Like, and I didn't have to push actually. Like the fetal ejection reflex just took over. When the next contraction came, the whole body came out, and I think it was just her feet left, and I gave a little push so that she was completely out, and my doula caught her, and she passed me the baby through the legs, and I had my daughter in my arms. Yeah.
Oh my god.
And those first few moments, like I think looking back, I could already I remember already feeling high when her body was coming out of me. And it's crazy how fast the high hits because moments before I was still like, God damn it, like growling like a bear and like making all these crazy noises. And then as soon as she was out, like it was just like peace and serenity and calmness, and it's like none of that happened. Like that's
Yeah.
how high you feel. I don't
Yeah.
know how if it was like that for you, but
Totally. I mean, even the first moments, I don't even remember it. I don't, well, for me, I don't remember Bjorn coming to my arms. I just remember the moments after. But yeah, there was this high, and everything kind of feels like a blur before all
yeah.
that.
My husband apparently, because I don't remember this happening because I was so out of it. Apparently he was like trying to ask me if it was a boy or a girl, and my doula was like, just give her a minute, like she's not all here yet. And then I checked and it was a girl, and we were like over the moon. Yeah.
Did you already have her name planned? If it was
We
a
did.
girl? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. We actually didn't have boy names ready. It was harder for us to agree on a boy name.
Yeah.
She didn't have a meconium poop. like in those first few days. So I think she actually pooped on the way out, because when my water broke, it was clear. But by the time the pictures that we have, the waters are like a little bit murky. So I think she pooped on the way out, but she was like totally fine. Like she cried right away. We got into the shower to wash everything off. And when I sat on the birth stool, she latched right away. And my placenta came out like just a few minutes after that. So
Whoa.
yeah.
It's all that oxytocin.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Made the placenta come right out.
Yeah. When I like, as I'm telling you this and I think of that moment, I get goosebumps. Like it's
Whoa.
like that, I don't know. And same thing, like when my doula came over for a postnatal appointment, when we were talking about this, like you can feel there's like an electric shock or something that goes through you. Like I will never forget it. And I don't know. This was like life changing, and I'm so happy that it worked out the way that I thought it was going to. You know.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so, how does postpartum look like for you this time around?
I got a meal plan with a Chinese company, so we didn't have to worry about food, and it was really great. Like they gave a lot of soups and like a lot of bone broths and low oil, low salt type of things. It was expensive, but like it was totally worth it because neither of us had to cook. It was in a large portions too, so my husband kind of ate some of it as well. The part that we struggled with this time was my toddler, my son, because he never had like he wasn't like mean to the baby or anything. He was really curious about her, but the adjustment for him was hard when he didn't have access to me as much, because I used to do bedtime all the time and breakfast and dinner, and all of a sudden like I had to be in my room for 2 weeks straight.
Mm-hmm.
The healing, I would say it was pretty easy. I think I could have stayed in bed even more, but I was just so like excited and happy and stuff. I didn't think about it, but it wasn't too bad. I did tear, but I used seaweed and I just kept a peri bottle by the toilet. What else? I was really sore. Sitting in bed hurt. So I think I
Yes.
could have I could have put more effort in like being vertical, but it took a while to figure out with like feeding her in bed. I didn't want any visitors.
What did you do with your placenta?
Oh,
And the cord.
so I had Ninaru process it into skincare products. So she stayed at my house for 3 days, and part of that was to do the placenta, and part of it was like postpartum support. And so she just like dried it up in my kitchen and incorporated it into a face oil, body butter, and a mask.
Cool.
So yeah.
Did you use all of it already?
I'm about a third of the way through,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah. I can't tell if it's doing anything, but it's nice to have. Yeah. Because I didn't even get to see my first one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what did you do with the cord?
We cut it, I think, about an hour, maybe 2 hours afterward, so that Nanaru could take the placenta and do her thing.
Okay. With scissors? You just cut it with scissors?
Yeah, just scissors. Yeah.
Was that Chinese meal service? Was it specifically for postpartum?
Yes. So they do tailor it to, or they try to tailor it to postpartum mothers. And there was like the sort of like an intake form where they asked me about the birth and if there was any concerns about blood loss. And I kind of just made it up. I was like, oh, my doctor thinks that I like might have lost too much blood. And I said that they gave me Pitocin afterward. Just totally like made it up. Yeah. And they ended up because of that, they ended up giving me more liver in those first 2 weeks, which is, I understand, it's great for you. I did not enjoy it.
Yeah.
It was like eating cardboard.
Oh, totally. Totally.
The broth that it came in was really good.
Oh, that's good. That's such a great idea.
Yeah.
I mean, the Chinese know the food, they know how to cook for postpartum for sure, historically.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Well, thank you so much for sharing your stories.
I'm really happy to share because I don't feel like I I don't know. I don't feel like I talk about it enough. Some people are not ready to talk about alternative options because, I mean, it's been 3 months and it has come up, and so far, like, it's people are surprised and they're like, oh wow, that's like great that you did that, and we're glad that you had a better experience than last time.
Just to go back, like, because it's technically a VBAC, right? A VBAC,
Yeah.
and did you did anyone ever like bring that up? Like, but you had a cesarean and you're gonna give
Oh
a
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. My family doctor. So I went to see him when my son was young for those like initial appointments for him, and I asked about that, and his take on it was, if you're gonna attempt a VBAC, you definitely have to do it in the hospital, because if your uterus ruptures, you're gonna have moments for them to be able to save you. And I like never asked him again after that, because I was just like, okay, it's good to know that you think like everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't a concern for me at all, because from what I know, the risk of rupture increases when labor is augmented and you are stressed out and it's not your own body doing your contractions. And I made sure that that wasn't even a possibility for me. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Well, you proved it to the family doctor. Look at you
Yeah.
now. I'm so grateful for you to share your stories.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.